Hi all, I myself Mohan Kumarian, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science, Srimati Shri YR JFGC, Pavagada. My today's topic is Introduction to PHP. This is a continuation class. In this session, you are going to learn about PHP variables, types of variables and their scope. At the end of this session, you must know what is a variable and scope of a variables. Let us start with variables. Variable is a named identifier that stores a value which can be changed during the execution of a program. So variable is nothing but it is a placeholder where we can store our values which are subjected to change during the program execution. There is no explicit syntax for declaration of variables in PHP. Since your PHP is a untyped or loosely typed language, there is no restriction that we need to declare a variable before its use. So as and when the requirement arises, we can directly assign some value to the variable. So PHP, it will automatically create a variable. The first time the value of the variable is set, the variable is created. A variable may hold a value of any type. So here, as we all know, there is no necessity of declaring a variable with its data type. Hence, any variable can hold any type of data. So there is no restrictions as in other programming languages. There is no compile time or runtime type checking on variables. So this is about variables in PHP. Next, we are move on to variable naming rules. Similar to any other programming languages, in PHP also we must follow some variable naming nomenclature, that is some variable naming rules. So here every variable in PHP must be preceded by a $sign. So here is an example. Here num is the name of a variable which is preceded with a sign, that is $sign. So this is a valid variable in PHP where all variables must be preceded with a $sign. Variable names must start with an alphabet or the underscore character. So here in PHP, all variable names must start with an alphabet or a underscore. Then only the variable is a valid variable. Variable names can contain only the characters, that is small case A to Z or uppercase A to Z, or it may have digits from 0 to 9 and even the underscore also. So any of your variable name can contain these character set, that is A to Z, small case, uppercase, 0 to 9 digits and underscores. So apart from this, any other character is included or included in your variable name, that will become invalid. Variable names should not contain spaces. So here in between your variable names there should not be any white space or empty space. If suppose it is very much required, there we need to have this underscore between those two names, like first name and second name, like that. In that case, you may use this underscore in between your first name and a second name. So apart from that, variable name should not contain any white spaces between the name of a variable. So variable names are case sensitive. This also we know PHP is specifically case sensitive in case of variable name declaration. PHP has no limit on length of variable names. So in PHP we can have arbitrary length of variable names. There is no any such limitations on the length of a variable name. So these are a set of rules which we need to follow while naming variables in a PHP. Next we learn we are going to learn how to assign a values to the variable. The value is assigned to a variable using a equal sign, that is what equal sign or equal sign, which is also known as an assignment operator in PHP. So here to assign a value to your PHP variable, we can assign the value with the help of this assignment operator or this equal sign. So here are few examples. Here I am assigning some value. Webtech is a string that I am assigning to the variable called name. So this is the name of a variable, and I am going to assign this string to this variable with the help of this assignment operator. In a second example, here I am assigning the value of another variable to the new variable, that is f name is a new variable. For this variable I am assigning a value of another variable called s name. In this way also we can assign. So by using this assignment operator, we can assign the values to the variables. Next is variables. Well, so this is the new thing in PHP. It's a little tricky to understand. So here variables allow you to access the content of a variable without knowing its name directly. So here we can access the content of a variable without knowing its name directly. So it is a indirect referencing to a variable. You are here indirectly accessing the content of a variable. Right, this is what your variables. We can reference the value of a variable whose name is stored in another variable. So here we can reference the value of a variable whose name is stored in another variable. A variable takes the value of a variable and treats that as a name of a variable. Well, so by this example we can understand the concept much more better. So here this foo is a variable. For this variable I am assigning the value called bar. Now with the concept of variables, I can make this bar as a variable. How? So by placing two $signs in front of the variable name. If I place two $signs in front of the variable name, the value of this variable will becomes the another variable. Value is bar. This value, that is the bar, will becomes the variable. And for that variable here I am assigning some other value called bars. Okay, so here the bars is the value which I am storing into the variable called bar. So here this bar is a value of some other variable. That's what here I am referencing the value of a variable whose name is stored in another variable. So here I am referencing the value whose this is a variable name which is stored in another variable called foo, right? So after executing this code, the variable bar has a value bars, because see here this bar will becomes a variable, and now assigning bars to this variable. This is about your variables. Next is variable references, or even we can call it as aliases. So here instead of assigning the value to a variable, we can even assign the reference of other variable. So here we can assign the value to a variable by using the assign by reference method. In this method, the new variable points to another variable, and changes done in any of the variable affects both the variable. So here I am assigning the reference of another variable to a new variable. Now the new variable becomes the alias of the other variable. So whatever the changes made in one variable will reflect in a other variable. So that's about your references. So in this method, the variable name must be preceded by a ampersand sign before passing its reference to the another variable. So by this example, we can understand this concept much more better. So now alt name is a variable. For this variable, I am assigning the reference of this variable called name. So that can be done by placing a ampersand symbol in front of a variable name. That is, towards the right hand side of your assignment operator, I am using this ampersand sign, ampersand symbol in front of the variable. So this variable's reference will be assigned to a new variable. Now whatever the changes made in this alt name will be reflected in name variable, and even whatever the changes made in this name variable will be reflected in a alt name variable. So this is about your variable references or aliases. Next, destroying a variables. PHP allows us to destroy a variable or an element of an array when they are not required. So if any variable or any element of an array is no more required, in such a cases we can destroy that element. We can destroy that element. So for that, your PHP will provided a function called unset function. So we can destroy a variable or element from an array by using unset function. By using this unset function, we can destroy a variable. We can free the memory what the variable has been utilized. So in this way, we can release the memory. We can destroy the variable which are no more required. So the syntax is like this. Syntax is unset followed by a parenthesis. Within a parenthesis, we can place the variables which we are intended to destroy. Okay. So in this example, I am using the function called unset function. Within a parenthesis, I use a variable name a. So here the variable a is no more required. Hence, I am destroying the variable a with the function called unset. That's about destroying a variable. Next is scope, variable scope. That is scope of a variable. The scope of a variable, which is controlled by a location of the variable's declaration, determines those parts of the program that can access it. So PHP has three different variable scopes, that is local scope, global scope and static scope. So here the scope of a variable is nothing but in which parts of the program that variable is accessible or visible. That speaks about the scope of a variable. In PHP, we have three different variable scopes, that is local scope, global scope and static scope. Well, we learned that there are three different scopes in PHP, three different variable scopes in PHP, that is local scope, global scope and static scope. Let us learn about local scope. A variable declared in a function is local to that function. These are visible or accessible only to the code in that function, and these variables which are declared within a function are not accessible outside the function. So such variables are called as an local scope variables. So here we have an example which gives a better understanding on local scope variables. So this is a function. So this is a PHP code. In this PHP code, we have a function called a myTest function. Within this myTest function, I have declared a variable called x and I have assigned a value 5. Now, this variable x is of a local scope. It means it can be accessible, it can be visible only within this function code, only within this function, that is within this open brackets and closed bracket. So within this function, within this function body only, this variable can be accessible, that is this can be visible only within this function body. Such variables are called local scope variables. Well, next is global scope variables. The variables which declare outside of function are global. They can be accessed from any part of the program, but by default they are not available or accessible inside a functions. To allow a function to access a global variable, you can use the global keyword inside the function to declare the variable within the function. To access a global variable within a function, use a global keyword before the variable. Well, so here the variables which are declared outside a function are called global variables, where these global variables can be accessible from any part of the program, but to access a global variables within a function, we can't access by default. So to access such global variables within a function, we need to declare those variables with a keyword called global. So that can be understandable by this example. So that is, this is a PHP code. Here I have declared variable x and variable y out of the function, hence it is of a global scope. So these variables can be accessible in anywhere of your code, but to access those variables within a function, so that is not possible by default. So to access those variables within a function, we need to declare the variable x and y, with a keyword called global. So we need to declare x and y with a keyword global, then only we can access these global variables within the function. So this is about your global scope variables. Next is static variable. Static variable retains its value between calls to the function, but it is visible only within that function. Usually what will happens, when I take a local variable, if I come out of the function, the value of the variable will be reset, or that variable will be resetted to some initial values. But in case of static variable, when the variable is declared with a keyword called static, the value of the variable will retains over function calls, right? So thus that kind of variable is called a static variable. So in PHP we can declare such static variables using a keyword called static. So keyword static is used to declare static variables. So here is an example. So here I have used a function called myTest. Within a function I have declared one variable, that is x, which is a static variable. So this is a static variable. So I have declared the static variable with a keyword called static. Initially I assigned some value 0. So next I call this value. If I call this function for the first time, the value will be assigned to 0 and then it will be incremented. So for the first time, when I print the content of this variable, initially it has 0, so hence it will display, it will give output 0. For the next call of that function, it will returns that incremented value and printed 1, and I call that function for the second time, the static value will retains the earlier value, that is 1, and later that will be incremented, hence it will give output as 2. So in this way your static variables will retains the values over the function calls. So these type of values are called static variables. Next here in PHP we have a set of super global variables. So here we have got some predefined variables in PHP. They are called super globals, which means that they are always accessible regardless of scope, and you can access them from any function, any class or any file without having to do anything special. So these are set of variables which can be accessible, these are all some predefined variables which can accessible from any part of the program, any part of your script without having to do anything special. Such variables are called super globals or super global variables. So here we have a set of super global variables where globals, so this contains all global variables in your script, including other super globals, and then your server variable. Here this server variable contains all the variables set by the web server you are using or other sources that directly relate to the execution of your script, and your request variable. This request variable contains all the variables sent via HTTP GET method and HTTP POST method and HTTP cookies. So, and your POST, this POST variable, this contains all the variables sent via HTTP POST request. GET variable, this GET variable contains all the variables sent via HTTP GET request. Files, this files variable contains all the variables sent via HTTP POST file upload. And env, so this contains environmental variables sent by your system or shell for the script. Cookies, this contains all variables sent via HTTP cookies. Session, this variable contains all the variables stored in a user's session. So this is about our super globals and some of the uses of super global variables. And this is the time to summarize what we have learned in this session. In this session, we learned about variable declaration and how to destroy a variable, and we learned about variables and variable references or aliases and different types of variables and its scopes, and also we learned about super global variables. That's all for the session. Thank you.